It was a Tuesday in March when my brother showed up at my door with a locksmith. Not a knock. Not a call ahead. Just the sound of someone working a drill outside my apartment at 7:14 in the morning, and my brother's voice behind it, low and steady, like what he was doing was perfectly reasonable. I'd been awake for 10 minutes, still in my old nursing school sweatshirt, coffee not even started. I looked through the peephole and saw two men, one I'd known my whole life, one I'd never seen, crouching at my lock like I wasn't on the other side of it. I opened the door before they could finish. My brother, Donovan, straightened up fast. He had that look he always got when he was caught doing something he'd already justified to himself. The locksmith took a small step back, glancing between us like he suddenly understood he was in the middle of something nobody had warned him about. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't even blink. "Mom asked me to handle the property while you figure out your situation." My situation? He said it like I was a problem to be managed, like I hadn't just signed a lease renewal 2 months ago, like my name wasn't on the door, the mailbox, the utility accounts, and every piece of paper the building management had on file. "This is my apartment, Donovan." He crossed his arms. "Mom's name is on the original lease." That wasn't a lie, exactly, but it wasn't the truth either, and he knew the difference. I need to back up, because if I start in the middle, none of it makes sense. Our dad passed away 14 months before that morning. He left behind a small savings account, a 2009 pickup truck, a storage unit full of woodworking equipment, and a 2-bedroom apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina that he'd been renting for 11 years. His name was on the lease. So was my mother's, even though she hadn't lived there since their separation in 2017. When he died, I moved into that apartment. I was the one who'd been living closest to him, checking in on him, taking him to his oncology appointments every third Thursday. I was 29 years old, working nights as a licensed practical nurse, and I had exactly enough saved to cover first, last, and a security deposit somewhere, but not somewhere good, not somewhere safe. Not somewhere I'd feel okay coming home to at 6 a.m. after a 12-hour shift. My dad knew that. 3 weeks before he died, he called me into the kitchen while he was still strong enough to sit at the table. He slid a folded paper toward me. It was a letter he'd written himself, not legally notarized, but handwritten and signed, saying he wanted me to take over the lease and stay in the apartment for as long as I needed. I didn't know enough then to understand that paper didn't mean much legally. I just thought my dad was taking care of me the way he always had, quietly, without ceremony, without making me feel like a burden. I called the property management company the week after the funeral, explained the situation. They were kind about it. They said since my name wasn't on the original lease, I'd need to go through a formal transfer process, which meant applying as a new tenant, passing the background and income check, and signing a new lease in my name only. I did all of it. Took 6 weeks. I paid the application fee, submitted my pay stubs, got my supervisor at the hospital to write a letter confirming my employment. In January, 4 months after my dad passed, I signed a lease with my name on it, only my name, and started paying rent from my own checking account. My mother knew all of this. I told her. She said it made sense. She said she was glad I had somewhere stable. What she didn't say was that she'd already told Donovan something different. I found out the way I find out most things in my family, late, and from the wrong person. My aunt called me on a Saturday while I was driving home from a double shift. She started the conversation with, "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," which is exactly what people say before they drop themselves directly into the middle of everything. She said my mother had mentioned at a family dinner I hadn't been invited to that Donovan was going to take over the Raleigh property because it was still technically in the family's name, and because he needed a place for him and his girlfriend to land while they figured out their finances. I almost pulled over. I said, very carefully, "Aunt Phyllis, I live there. I have a lease. In my name." Silence. "Your mom said you were only staying temporarily," she said, "until you got back on your feet." I hadn't said that to anyone. I hadn't thought it, There was nothing temporary about the lease I'd signed, the renter's insurance I was paying, the IKEA shelves I'd spent a whole weekend assembling. I thanked my aunt, said I had to go, and sat in the parking lot of a Walgreens for 11 minutes trying to breathe through it. That night, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been expecting me. "Mom," I said, "what did you tell Donovan about the apartment?" A pause, then, "I just mentioned that the lease situation was complicated." "It's not complicated. I signed a new lease in January." "Well, yes, but originally—" "There's no originally anymore. The original lease expired. Mine started." Another pause. Then, softer, "Donovan's really struggling right now, sweetheart. His hours got cut at work and Melissa needs stability. You've always been the capable one. You figure things out." And there it was. That sentence. The one that sounds like a compliment and is actually a trap. You're the capable one. Translation, you can absorb this. You can sacrifice this. You can give this up because you'll land on your feet and he won't. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just let the silence sit. "I'm not giving up my apartment," I said. "I need you to be clear with Donovan about that." She said she would. She didn't. Which is how I ended up watching my brother try to change my locks at 7 in the morning. The locksmith, to his credit, stopped working the second I appeared. He looked at Donovan and said, Is this her place?" Donovan said, "It's a family property." I said, "I have a signed lease. Do you want to see it?" The locksmith looked at his tools, looked at me, looked at Donovan, and started packing up his bag. "I'm sorry, Mum, I can't do this if you're a current tenant." He was gone before Donovan could argue. Donovan turned to me with that flat expression he gets when something doesn't go the way he planned. "You're making this into something it doesn't have to be," he said. "You came to change my locks. We just need to talk about the transition." There is no transition. I stepped fully into the doorway. I live here. I have a lease. My name is on it. There's nothing to transition. He shifted his weight, tried a different angle. "Mum needs this to work out." "Mum doesn't live here. I do." "She's on the original." "Donovan." I kept my voice level. "The original lease is gone. A new one exists. With my name. Call the property management company if you don't believe me. They'll tell you the same thing." He stared at me for a long moment. There was something in his face that I recognized. The look of someone who'd built an entire plan on a version of reality that wasn't real, and was only just beginning to understand that. "You're really not going to help us out," he said. I almost said something sharp. Instead I said, "I'm not going to give you my home. That's different." He left. He didn't say goodbye. The calls started that afternoon. First my mother, voice tight with managed hurt. "Donovan said you refused to even discuss it." "There's nothing to discuss. You could find another place." "I have a place. I'm in it." Then a text from Donovan, "Don't be selfish. Dad would have wanted us to help each other." I read that one 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and made coffee. My dad would have wanted a lot of things. He would have wanted to see me settled and safe. He would have wanted his daughter to sleep without worrying about whether her family was going to show up with power tools while she was trying to rest after a night shift. I was pretty sure that's not what Donovan meant, but I also knew it was the truth. By evening, my phone had 17 missed calls from various combinations at my mother, Donovan, and 2 cousins I barely spoke to. Someone had clearly been working the phones. I didn't call back. I sat on my couch in the apartment that was mine, in the neighborhood I'd learned, near the coffee shop where the barista knew my order, 2 miles from the hospital where I'd spent the last 3 years building something I was proud of, and I let the calls go to voicemail. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the property management company's tenant portal. I found the lease. I saved a copy in 3 places. I found every email confirming my application approval, my rent payments, my renter's insurance. I made a folder and labeled it simply, documentation. I didn't know yet exactly why I'd need it, but I'd worked long enough in a hospital to know that you document everything before you need it, not after. The next blow came 4 days later. I got an email notification from my bank, a credit monitoring alert. Someone had run an inquiry on my credit file. I logged in. There it was, a hard pull from a property company I didn't recognize in Raleigh, initiated by a co-applicant listing, and my name as the primary applicant. I hadn't applied for anything. My hands went cold. I sat at the kitchen table and read the notification 3 times, thinking I was misunderstanding something. I wasn't. I called the number listed on the inquiry, got a leasing office, explained who I was. After several minutes on hold, a manager came on and told me that a joint rental application had been submitted earlier that week under my name and social security number, with a second applicant listed as Donovan Marsh, my brother. The application was for a 2-bedroom unit across town. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't submitted anything. I hadn't authorized anyone to use my information. Can you tell me how the application was submitted? I asked. Online, the manager said, with your credentials. I hung up, sat still. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn. My mother had my social security number. She'd asked for it 2 years ago, when she was helping me set up a health insurance plan after I graduated, or at least, that's what she said she needed it for. I'd given it to her without a second thought because she was my mother and I was 27 and I didn't think I needed to protect myself from her. I called my bank and immediately placed a fraud alert on my credit file. Then I called all 3 credit bureaus and froze my credit entirely. The woman at Experian was patient and kind and said I wasn't the first person she'd heard from that week with a similar situation. That somehow made it worse. I called my friend Petra from nursing school that night. Not because she was a lawyer, she wasn't, but because she was the person I trusted most to tell me the truth when I needed it and hold back when I didn't. Tell me what happened, she said. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, you need an attorney, not a general one, someone who handles tenant rights and consumer fraud, and you need to file a police report." A police report, I repeated. Using your social security number without your consent to apply for credit or housing is identity theft. That's not a family argument. That's a crime. I sat with that word for a moment. Crime. Not disagreement. Not miscommunication. Not Donovan being Donovan. Crime. I don't want to press charges against my own brother, I said. You don't have to decide that right now, Petra said, but you need to document it, because if you don't, it's going to keep happening. She was right. I knew she was right even before she said it. My family had always operated on the assumption that I would absorb things rather than document them, forgive rather than record, move on rather than hold the line. That assumption had been right for 29 years. It was about to stop being right. I filed the police report the next morning. The officer who took my statement was methodical and unhurried, which I was grateful for. He explained that unauthorized use of personal identifying information to submit credit or housing applications constituted identity fraud under North Carolina law. He said I would be contacted by a detective if the case was escalated. After I left the precinct, I sat in my car for a while. I wasn't crying. I was just tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix. That afternoon, I found a tenant rights attorney named by my hospital's employee assistance program. She had a waiting room with good lighting and a small succulent on the reception desk, which I found unaccountably comforting. She reviewed the documentation I brought: lease, credit alert, police report number, bank statement showing consecutive rent payments, and said, with complete calm, "Your position is strong, the lease is unambiguous, and the credit application issue is a separate matter that could have serious legal consequences for whoever submitted it." She drafted a formal cease and desist letter that afternoon. It was addressed to my mother and Donovan. It outlined the lease, the fraud alert, the police report, and the legal remedies available to me if there were any further attempts to interfere with my tenancy or my financial accounts. I signed it. She sent it. My mother called that evening. Her voice was different. The carefully injured tone was gone, replaced by something harder. "You sent a lawyer's letter to my house," she said. "Yes." "Do you know how that looks? To the family?" I know what it says. That's more important. A pause. You filed a police report on your own brother. Someone used my social security number without my permission. I didn't know how else I was supposed to respond to that. You could have talked to us. I've tried to talk to you twice since January, and both times you said you'd handle it and didn't. Silence. Your father would be ashamed, she said. I thought about my dad sitting at the kitchen table, pushing that folded letter across to me, quietly, without drama, taking care of me the only way he had left. I don't think he would, I said. I think he'd be glad I protected myself. She hung up. I put the phone down, looked at the shelves I'd built, the nursing school textbooks I hadn't been able to bring myself to throw away, the small framed photo of my dad and me from a camping trip we took when I was 12. This apartment had become mine not because of paperwork, though the paperwork mattered, but because I'd lived in it, breathed in it, come home to it after shifts that broke me a little, and put myself back together inside its walls. No one was taking that. Donovan called 3 days later. He didn't open with anger. He opened with something worse, a careful, rehearsed calm. I need you to understand that what we did, or what happened, wasn't meant to hurt you. Melissa and I are genuinely struggling. I thought if we could just get ahead of the paperwork, you'd come around. Get ahead of the paperwork, I said slowly. You mean use my name without asking? I needed to show her something, that I was handling things. By using my identity. It was one application. Donovan, I set down the glass I was holding because I didn't trust myself not to grip it too hard. It doesn't matter that it was one. I didn't consent. That's the entire issue, not the number of times, the consent. He went quiet. And beyond that, I said, even if you'd asked me, even if you'd come to me like a human being and said, hey, I'm in a bad place, can you help? The answer would still have been no, because this is where I live, because I can't give that up, because needing your situation to work out doesn't entitle you to use mine. You've always had it easier, he said. Then, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud, that's what Mum always says. Something clicked into place, not like a surprise, more like confirmation. Donovan, I said, I worked nights for 3 years to save enough to pass that credit check. I sat with Dad through 8 rounds of chemo and drove him home when he couldn't see straight from the medication and got 3 hours of sleep before a 12-hour shift. That isn't easier. That's just a different kind of hard. He didn't say anything for a long time. I don't know what you want me to say, he finally said. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to stop. And I want you to tell Mom to stop, because if anything else happens with my credit or my lease, the attorney handles it from here, not me. He hung up, but this time the calls from the family network stopped. 3 weeks later, my attorney confirmed that the fraudulent application had been formally flagged and closed. The property company had been cooperative once they received the legal documentation. My credit report was clean. The freeze remained in place, because I decided it was just smarter to keep it. I also moved my renter's insurance to a different company and updated my emergency contact at work to Petra instead of my mother. Small things, but they mattered. One evening, I was coming home from a shift at the hospital, the good kind of tired, the kind where you've done something real and the exhaustion is clean, and I stopped at the bottom of the stairs leading up to my apartment. I'd done this walk hundreds of times and it had never registered as anything other than routine. That night it registered. The lights in the stairwell were the same fluorescent flicker they always were. The neighbour's cat was sitting in the hallway window like always. My mailbox had a small dent in the corner from the day I moved in and bumped it with a box. All of it exactly as it had been. And all of it mine. Not because my dad had said so in a letter that didn't hold up legally. Not because my family had decided it was okay, but because I had done every single thing required to make it mine, on paper and in practice, and I had defended it when defending it was the hardest thing I'd ever done that didn't involve a medical emergency. I went upstairs, made tea, and called Petra. It's officially over, I said. How do you feel? I thought about it honestly, not how I expected. Not relieved exactly, just solid. That's what I feel like when I finally finish a chart I've been putting off, she said, and I laughed for the first time in weeks. My mother sent a message 6 weeks later, not a call, a text. It said, "I know things have been hard. I hope you're okay." I read it twice. I didn't know what it was, a genuine opening or the beginning of another approach, or just something she needed to send so she could tell herself she'd reached out. I didn't know, and I decided I didn't have to decide immediately. I replied, "I'm okay, I hope you are too." And then I put the phone down and didn't wait to see what came next. That was the thing I was still learning, that not every door had to be slammed or swung wide open. Some of them could just be closed, gently, with a lock that only you hold the key to. I went to bed that night at a reasonable hour, which for a night shift nurse is its own small miracle. The apartment was quiet. The street lights made long shapes across the ceiling. Somewhere down the block, someone had a wind chime going in the March air. I didn't lie awake running through what I should have said, or what came next, or whether the family would regroup and try again. I'd done the paperwork. I'd held the line. I had the documentation in a folder on my desktop, and the knowledge in my body of what it felt like to refuse to be moved. My name was on the lease, my rent was paid, my locks had never been changed. That was enough to sleep on. I keep thinking about the moment the locksmith packed up his bag and left. He didn't say much. He just looked at me, looked at Donovan, did the math, and walked away. That small act, a stranger choosing not to participate in something wrong, has stayed with me longer than almost anything else from that whole ordeal. Because, here's what I've come to understand, the way things unfolded wasn't random. Every consequence in that situation traced back to a choice someone made. My brother chose to build a plan on a foundation he knew wasn't solid. My mother chose to tell a version of events that served her without checking whether it was true, and I, for the first time in my adult life, chose to stop absorbing the damage quietly and start responding with documentation instead of just disappointment. That's the cause and effect nobody talks about in family conflict. We focus so much on who did what, who said what, who hurt whom. But underneath all of it, there's a simpler pattern. What you allow continues. What you document, you can defend. What you refuse to hand over stays yours. I used to think being the capable one in the family meant being the one who held things together when everyone else let go. I was wrong. Being capable doesn't mean being endlessly available to catch other people's problems at the cost of your own stability. Real capability, the kind that actually holds up under pressure, means knowing what you've earned, knowing what it cost you, and knowing when someone is asking you to give it away dressed up as obligation. Petra said something to me early on that I didn't fully land until much later. She said the difference between a family argument and a legal matter is consent, not anger, not intention, not even outcome, just whether someone agreed to what was done with their name, their credit, their life. That framing changed something in me. It gave me a way to think about what happened that wasn't tangled up in guilt or history. I hadn't been cruel. I hadn't been selfish. I had simply refused to consent to something I hadn't agreed to. That was it. That was the whole thing. What I learned from all of it isn't a lesson I could have gotten from a book or a conversation. It came from sitting at a kitchen table reading a fraud alert with my hands going cold, and then, instead of calling my mother, calling the bank. That's where the real work was. Not in the confrontations, not in the clever things I said to Donovan at the door, but in the quiet, unglamorous decision to treat my own interests as worth protecting. There's a kind of intelligence that only develops when you stop outsourcing your trust. I trusted my mother with information because I assumed the relationship made it safe. It didn't. Safety isn't a given in any relationship. It's built through consistent behavior over time, and withdrawn when that behavior changes. Understanding that isn't cynical, it's just honest. And honesty, I found, is the only foundation that holds. I still have the folder on my desktop labeled documentation. I haven't opened it in months, but I know it's there. And knowing it's there, knowing I did the work to protect myself when it mattered, is its own kind of quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that just lets you sleep.